Howdy, guys. Jojo Siwa has officially entered her new era, and instead of it feeling like growth, it feels like chaos. Not the good kind either, the confusing, rushed identity whiplash kind that leaves everyone asking the same question at the same time. What is actually going on here? Because this isn't just a hairstyle change. This isn't just I grew up. This is a full personality reset happening in real time with controversy, shock performances, and awkward explanations layered on top of each other. And the wild part is, the more JoJo talks about this being her true self, the less authentic it starts to feel. So today, we're not hate watching, we're not dogpiling, we're doing a reality check. Now let's establish something real quick. JoJo Siwa isn't some random influencer experimenting with aesthetics. She's one of the most recognizable child stars of the last decade. Massive brand deals, global tours, a carefully crafted image that was marketed directly to kids, and more importantly, parents. So when someone like that suddenly flips the switch and says, everything before this wasn't really me, people are going to have questions. And those questions aren't hate, they're normal, especially when the rebrand is happening this fast, this loud, and this aggressively. Because this isn't JoJo easing into adulthood. This feels like JoJo sprinting away from her past and hoping nobody notices how messy the transition looks. And here's what makes it extra complicated. She built an empire on being relatable to kids. Target aisles full of bows, Nickelodeon specials, birthday parties themed around her brand. Parents trusted her, kids idolized her. That's not a small thing to just walk away from without explanation. Here's the first issue. JoJo keeps saying this era is about authenticity, freedom, and finally being herself. But the execution feels anything but natural. Everything about this rollout feels pre-packaged. The outfits, the choreographed edginess, the interviews repeating the same talking points. It doesn't feel like someone discovering themselves. It feels like someone performing adulthood. And that's where people start getting uncomfortable. Because when authenticity is real, it doesn't need to be screamed. It shows up quietly, confidently, consistently. This feels like a costume change with a press release. And look, we've all seen child stars grow up. Selena Gomez did it. Zendaya did it. Billie Eilish is doing it right now. The difference, they didn't treat their past like it was a lie. They treated it like a chapter. JoJo's treating her past like evidence she needs to destroy. That's not confidence, that's overcorrection. Another major problem is the order of operations. JoJo didn't explain the shift first. She shocked people first, then tried to explain afterward. That's backwards. When you come from a kid-friendly brand, you don't get to act surprised when parents, fans, and the general public react strongly to sudden sexualized performances and aggressive imagery. That reaction was predictable, and instead of acknowledging that, the response has mostly been, if you don't like it, you're stuck in the past. That's not accountability, that's deflection. You can grow up without pretending your audience is stupid for being confused. Think about it this way. If you spent years building trust with an audience, and then you do a complete 180 without context, people aren't mad because they're controlling, they're confused because you gave them whiplash. And confusion isn't the same as hate, but JoJo's team seems to be treating it that way. Instead of saying, hey, I know this is different, let me walk you through my journey, it's been more like, this is me now, deal with it. That's not how you bring people along, that's how you lose them. This is where it gets uncomfortable. JoJo keeps framing this as, this is the real me, everything before was fake. And that's a dangerous narrative, because now you're not just changing, you're invalidating the entire career that built your platform. You're telling fans, the version of me you supported wasn't real. That doesn't make people feel proud, it makes them feel used. Growth doesn't require erasing your past, it requires integrating it. And right now, JoJo is acting like the past is embarrassing instead of foundational. Here's the thing about growing up in public. It's hard, nobody's denying that, but part of that process is honoring where you came from, even if you're moving in a different direction. When you say that wasn't the real me, you're essentially saying everyone who supported you back then was supporting, what, a lie, a performance? That's rough, especially for the kids who looked up to her and the parents who let their kids look up to her because she felt safe. Here's something nobody wants to say out loud. Confident people don't need to constantly announce how confident they are, and yet this rebrand is filled with reassurance. I'm finally free. I don't care what anyone thinks. This is who I really am. If that were true, there wouldn't be this much explaining. There's a difference between boldness and insecurity disguised as boldness, and this is leaning dangerously close to the second one. Because truly confident people, they just live. They don't need to defend their choices every 5 seconds. They don't need to remind you how unbothered they are. The fact that JoJo is doing press runs explaining why she's so free, that's the opposite of freedom. That's someone who cares deeply about what people think and is trying really hard to convince everyone, including herself, that she doesn't. Let's be clear. Most people aren't angry at JoJo. They're confused by the inconsistency. One moment it's empowerment, the next it's shock value, then it's defensive interviews, then it's you just don't get it. That's not a clear message, that's noise. And when your brand becomes noise, people stop listening. Here's what consistency looks like. You say you're being authentic, so you show up authentically. Not just in the music videos, but in the interviews, in the candid moments, in the way you talk about your journey. But right now, the messaging is all over the place. Is this about artistic freedom? Then why does every move feel so calculated? Is this about not caring what people think? Then why respond to every critique? Is this about being yourself? Then why does it look like you're trying on different versions of edgy to see what sticks? People can smell inauthenticity from a mile away. And the harder you push the "this is real" narrative while doing things that feel performative, the less people believe you. Here's the part nobody wants to admit. Jojo Siwa didn't need to do any of this. She already won. She had name recognition, resources, creative control, and a massive platform. She could have transitioned slowly, honestly, and on her own terms. Instead, this feels rushed, like someone panicking about relevance instead of trusting longevity. And that's the tragedy, because there's a playbook for this. Taylor Swift went from country darling to pop superstar. Miley Cyrus went from Hannah Montana to, well, Miley Cyrus. Ariana Grande went from Nickelodeon to global icon. None of them did it overnight. None of them burned their past to the ground. None of them made it feel like an emergency. JoJo's rollout feels like she's racing against a clock that doesn't exist. And in that rush, she's making choices that feel reactionary instead of intentional, shocking instead of strategic, desperate instead of deliberate. The saddest part, she didn't need to panic. She had time. She had goodwill, she had options. This isn't about JoJo being too much, it's about internet culture pushing extremes over evolution. If you don't shock, you don't trend. If you don't trend, you disappear. And JoJo looks like she's fighting that fear in real time. But the internet doesn't reward panic, it rewards clarity. Let's talk about what the internet does to people, especially young celebrities who grew up online. It creates this false urgency, this feeling that if you're not constantly doing something new, something wild, something trendable, you're irrelevant. But that's not true. The people with real staying power, they're not chasing trends, they're setting them. They're not performing chaos, they're building slowly. And JoJo's caught in this trap where she thinks she needs to be everywhere all at once, doing the most, or she'll be forgotten. But here's the reality. People remember authenticity. They remember consistency. They remember artists who evolved naturally, not ones who exploded into something unrecognizable overnight. The internet might reward shock in the short term, but it forgets shock fast. What it doesn't forget? Real artistry, real growth, real honesty. And right now, this doesn't feel real. It feels like survival mode. Imagine if JoJo had done this differently. Imagine if she'd taken a year off, worked on music, figured herself out away from the cameras, then came back with a project that said, "Hey, I've grown. Here's where I've been. Here's where I'm going." No shock performances, no defensive interviews, just honest evolution. People would have respected that. Instead, we got whiplash, we got confusion, we got a rebrand that feels like it's being workshopped in real time based on Twitter reactions. And that's not fair to JoJo, honestly, because she deserves better than this chaotic rollout. She deserves a team that helps her grow with intention instead of chasing virality. She deserves the space to actually become who she wants to be instead of performing who she thinks she needs to be. At the end of the day, JoJo can do whatever she wants. She's grown. That's not the debate. The debate is whether this rebrand is actually growth or just noise dressed up as rebellion. You see what I mean, right? Because growth is quiet, growth is steady, growth doesn't need a press release every week explaining why it's happening. This isn't growth. This is a PR strategy that forgot to include the actual person in the middle of it. And until JoJo figures out who she actually is, not who she thinks she needs to be for clicks, for trends, for relevance, this era is going to keep feeling hollow. Let me know what you think about this whole situation. And yeah, who should we reality check next?